got a bidet! Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video. In today's Shoot the Sheev, we are talking about our favorite Star Wars characters, and this can be across any Star Wars medium that we've watched or read or whatever, played in video games. Just whatever we have been in contact with Star Wars, whoever gravitated to us the most is who we each picked for today. We each will be talking about one that we picked. I think we're going to start with Sarah eventually here. And then you may see we have someone new on the podcast, but not new to the channel, my sister Alyssa. She has been on here in the past with, what's the brand? Is it Color Pop? Mm-hmm. We've had some Star Wars themed Color Pop unboxings on the channel in the past, so make sure to check those out. Have you been on any of the other videos?
I don't think so.
Okay. So yeah,
She was in the Sims when we did Sims.
Oh, that's right.
Just kind of in the background.
Yeah. We didn't do very many with those Sims videos just because it just didn't gravitate to me, but she was our brains of the operation because I had no idea what I was doing. Half the time my character was taking a sleep or a rest on the bench or peeing in the bushes. So that's about all I got out of the game so far. So yeah, my sister is here on the channel with us for this podcast today. Like I've mentioned in previous podcasts, we're trying to, bring more people into these so we can get some more opinions. So as far as favorite characters, Sarah, who is your favorite Star Wars character?
Well, if I have not mentioned this on the channel already, my favorite is definitely Wicket, hands down. I really love all of the Ewoks, but because you have to pick one character, right? So I'm gonna focus on Wicket here. I just like that they're so cute. They're like little teddy bears. They have their own innovative ways, like they build traps and things to try and trap the stormtroopers or whoever is invading their village. I really like how innovative they are with their village itself, and that they basically live in tree houses. They've got paragliders, and they use what do you call it? Slingshots. Slingshots is another one of their big weapons, and clubs. I like
that one where they're like flinging it around.
Oh yeah, yep. When they're gonna.
What would you call that?
There's
a name for it, but all I remember is that when Wicket went to do one, he slapped himself in the face.
I don't remember the name for it off the top of my head. But they got a little bit of comic relief to them. They are one of the few characters that don't talk at all in a language that you can understand, but I love them anyway because they're just adorable. They're so fluffy. A fun fact that I like about Wicket specifically is that Wicket, his full name is Wicket Warwick, right? And he's played by Warwick Davis. Is that his name? I knew his name was Warwick, but I wasn't sure on his last name. But I think that's really cool that they used the actor's real name as part of the character's name from the original Star Wars films. They have their own cartoon. The interaction between Leia and I believe it's Wicket that she meets in the film.
Yep. She meets Wicket. He's the first Ewok that is met in the film.
Right. Yeah, so they live in the jungle on Endor. Endor, I think, is a really neat planet, much better than some of the other ones like Tatooine, where it's just sand everywhere. I'm sure Jeremy will talk about later how much he hates sand.
Well, my favorite character does. Foreshadowing.
Sorry, trying to allude to something there.
I
I don't
couldn't
know. I
figure out
just
what the thingy-majigger is, so
you did?
no, no, I couldn't. I was trying to figure it out. Um, couldn't find the name.
Oh, I gotcha. Um, Basically it's like they'll hold a rock in a net and then they'll swing the net around their body to try to fling the rock um to actually hit somebody. I remember even the Endor sets in Lego Star Wars and setting up these giant logs. I don't know how these Ewoks would ever be strong enough to pick up these giant logs, but they'd set up these giant logs up high in the air, far apart from one another, so that when the chicken walker walked over um, some sort of sensor or something, these giant logs would come kabooming into each other and smashing the chicken walker. And it's just, how can these little tiny creatures do so much damage and not just, get obliterated? You think that they wouldn't be um like a valuable part to the rebellion because they're tiny and adorable, but yet they kick some butt. They do some work.
Probably the same answer as when they said, "How did people build the pyramids back then?" It's aliens, people. Aliens.
It's aliens, huh?
Yes.
Um yeah, I didn't even think about, their role in video games until you mentioned that in the intro, but I thought that was really cool too. I know they had, what was it, Battlefront 2 that we played where you could be an Ewok sometimes.
Yeah, I forget what the mode was. I want to say it was like Hunt or something. Because it wasn't just the Ewoks that had that special mode. There was a thing in the original Battlefront 2 where certain maps, like I think Naboo had it where you could play as Gungans, and mm, don't quote me on this, but I think on Hoth you could play as a Wampa, but there was a handful of different planets where there were certain like species or creatures that were special to them where if you played that mode you got to play as them. I want to say Tatooine you got to be a Tusken Raider.
That'd be pretty cool.
I don't remember 100%, but definitely the Ewoks. Yes.
Yeah, I remember from the Ewoks, there were parts of it that made me angry, and there were parts of it that made me happy with that mode in that game. You know, they could crawl into little parts of the trees and go in certain tunnels and stuff that the normal sized characters couldn't go in, so that was pretty cool. But there were times where I was like, wishing that I had a blaster rifle and I didn't and whatnot because they're limited to their makeshift weapons. But actually that reminds me too, bouncing back to the Lego game, they were one of the few characters that could craft things, taking was it like taking say sticks and a leaf or something like that, and they could craft a paraglider or they had like a web launcher that they made too, so they could crawl up trees.
I remember that now. Yep.
I don't know why they need that because I think they could crawl up the tree on their own, but for the sake of Lego, they did it. Um, but aside from the movies and the video games, one of my favorite parts about the Ewoks too, and Wicked, of course, is all the merch. You know, I have so many stuffed animals of these things because they're just cute and cuddly. There's no such thing as too many for me. Um, they're one of the characters I never get sick of seeing, t-shirts. Um, they we even had a Star Wars version of D&D that we played for around a year or so. And of course, when you get to pick your character, I didn't pick Wicket, but I did pick an Ewok, and I picked Nisa, who I believe is a princess, I think. I'm not super familiar with her character, um, but for the sake of trying to pick a character that's not super well known in the Star Wars universe, that's why I picked her for that. But the reason why I bring it up is that I wanted to pick an Ewok because they're my favorite.
Which is interesting because we watch the animated shows week to week, but we haven't sat down to watch the animated Ewok show. Because that is a thing. I think they had 2 seasons of it. There was a droid show as well with 3PO and R2. It's kind of like the adventures of the two. But
Is that called Droid Tales, or is that something different?
no, Droid Tales was a Lego show, where they're retelling the original or the George Lucas films for the most part, and then um, they had like a subplot in between all that stuff. But I will say, in relation to a handful of your things, because you said your favorite is the Ewoks because of all that stuff. There's some interesting things where people actually really don't like the Ewoks for all the stuff that you said. Um,
Why?
yeah, because um, I remember when Return of the Jedi came out, people wouldn't believe that like these little teddy bear people could take out the Empire, so to speak. Um, I remember for the Force Unleashed 2, because you mentioned the video games, and that's why I had a huge smirk on my face when you said it, is because I believe it was Force Unleashed 2, not the first one. There was a DLC like what if scenario where if Starkiller's evil clone had survived, what would happen? And one of the levels was the Battle of Endor, and you can use Force Lightning to like fry them to Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Oh
And there was a trophy for it too, like fry a certain amount of Ewoks on the Endor level. It was a lot of fun. It was great. I haven't played it in a long time though. Another cool thing is that in that what if scenario, they also explore the idea of if Leia had become a Jedi, so then you actually end up fighting her with her lightsaber. Um, yeah, Ewok stuff is very interesting. I'll even put myself a little plug in here. I've made sure that you've gotten all the exclusive Ewok plushies from Disney. They have like these little basket things that they've had. I think they've maybe had two come out since we've been together. Probably
I think
since
so.
Disney owned Star Wars, because they're probably known for making that kind of a thing. But they've had exclusive Ewok baskets where there's like, I don't know, 6 or 8 small Ewoks in there. And there's a couple of them where, you can buy variations of that character elsewhere, but there's usually at least 1 or 2 that are exclusive to that basket. So we do have those, which I'm very, very happy to have because they're super soft. They are not cheap. They were not cheap, I can tell you that. Um,
On the topic of toys, but not necessarily plushies, they also, back in the day, um, well, even right now, so they come out with like action figures, right? And so some of the more retro ones emphasized more or had more available for Ewoks because, the movie was a thing back then, and the Ewoks haven't really been a big part of the films in recent years, so there haven't been a whole lot of action figures of them in recent years. But I do own quite a few. I'd say at least 10 different action figures of the Ewoks and of, many of them of Wicket, but a couple of other characters like Tebow and Logray because they were big parts of the film too, um, from the 70s. So not soft, but still cool.
um, but yeah, I would agree with that because we collect the Black Series figures and we show them here on the channel once we get new ones. But I think there's only been like 1, maybe 2 Ewok figures that have come out for the ones that we collect. I know there's the vintage collection as well, and there's been a couple, maybe 1 or 2 for that too. But yeah, you definitely don't see nearly as much merch for the Ewoks. You would maybe think at Disney World, because at Disney World there's Star Tours, and the entrance to Star Tours is literally Endor, and you'd think maybe they'd throw in some more merch there, for people that really like Ewoks. It's a very easy thing to sell to kids too, because it's like a stuffed teddy bear. Um, but I mean, can't you see Disney doing like a Build-A-Bear but a Build-A-Ewok?
That would be awesome, and I definitely
Build-A-Bear
would make
did
a trip.
have that.
Did they have like 1 or 2 or?
I remember what you're talking about because we actually went and got those.
Yep, we built
Yeah,
a
we did.
Ewok or a Wicket. Yeah.
We do have one of those somewhere around here.
There
And we
was a voice chip box that you could put in there too with the different Ewok sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I remember having to go there and I got it for you as a gift, and I had to do this silly little ceremony that they make you do, like click your heels and turn around
The
twice,
heart ceremony.
kiss the heart, whatever it is. Yeah, I felt embarrassed to say the least. And then years later, Sarah says you can opt out of that stuff, and it's like, well, I wish I would have known that back then.
That is hilarious, and I wish I was there to see that.
Well, I'm glad nobody was there to see that because I think it was right around closing time. Um, well, that was Sarah's favorite Star Wars character. When we come back, we will be talking about Alyssa's favorite Star Wars character. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up during the prequel era? Do you wonder what type of merchandise was around then? How different was it than it is now? Check out our videos on this channel where we talk about the merchandise of the Phantom Menace and the merchandise of Attack of the Clones. They are here on this channel. The Phantom Menace is my first video ever on YouTube, so there's a special place in my heart for that one. So please, if any, check that out. Now back to our show. Welcome back, everybody. We are here for our second favorite Star Wars character amongst the three of us. And Alyssa, who is your favorite Star Wars character?
Well, my favorite Star Wars character of all time has to be Chewbacca. I think, I mean, he does provide some comic relief throughout the films, but I also think he's very relatable as a character. He always has his friends back whenever there's like some crazy plan that they have to do in the movies. He's always game for it. He cares about his friends. Um, he speaks a different language like the Ewoks do, and like Wicket does, but people still understand him in the films. Um, and I feel very emotionally invested with Chewbacca. When I thought he died in The Rise of Skywalker, I cried in the movie theaters and I was devastated. So I definitely really like Chewbacca. I dressed up as him for Halloween one year with my dog, and my dog was an Ewok. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, Chewbacca has to be my favorite overall.
Those
Thank
are some pretty
goodness.
good costumes.
What was that?
I said those were some pretty good costumes. What were you trying to say?
Oh, I was saying, thank goodness that in The Rise of Skywalker, like 30 seconds later, they showed Chewbacca alive again.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
was
that was really depressing for that 30 seconds.
that's one of the comments that's usually made about that movie is that, it was something very drastic and um daring to do, so to speak, to kill off a legacy character like that, and then like 30 seconds later we know he's okay, and so people felt like, why'd you do that to me, kind of a thing. I think it's funny that you mentioned that he's always down to do what the group is willing to do, because like when we see the movie Solo, and we see where these two guys meet for the first time, Han and Chewie, uh if I remember correctly, I feel like Chewie has some sort of I don't know if life debt is what it was, but there's some sort of connection between him and Han where he like has to do what Han wants to do.
Mhm.
So it makes me wonder um where that kind of ventures between Chewie having his own opinion, because I also remember there are parts of the movies where Han is telling him to do something and he's like shaking his head, no, 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 no. Um I'm trying to remember. I think it's like in the original film where Han is trying to make Chewie do something and he refuses to do it. Um I can't remember what it was. If you give me a minute, I'll think of it. I have to like replay the scene in my head.
Yeah. I think Chewie and Han were great partners in crime, and when Chewie saw Han get killed, that was devastating for him. I don't remember if that was in Rogue One when Kylo Ren killed Han Solo.
That was number 7.
Number 7. So that was devastating for Chewbacca to watch that happen to his friend, of course.
And for a creature of few words, because literally all he ever says is
Yes.
You
But
could
you
still
can
tell-
feel it.
you could still tell he was upset.
Yes, you can feel it.
Do you want to give your impression?
No, I don't. I don't want to do my impression of Chewbacca.
Oh, but you did such a good job.
We have some friends that can do a pretty good Chewbacca. I know our friend Billy can do it pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
It's something to do with gurgling of the saliva and talking at the same time. I don't know how he does it. I do know.
Mine was very amateur, so please excuse my poor skills.
We're by far not professionals with that. For Star Wars, when I mentioned our favorite games in our previous previous 2 podcasts ago, I mentioned Star Wars Battlefront 2. He was a tank in that game. I think he was in the game from the beginning. But he had a move where like you could run and then you like smash the ground with with your hands and it just like wipes out everybody around you or knocks them over, and then you can just pick up your bowcaster and shoot them. So I did have a lot of fun playing as Chewie, especially with different missions where there might be like a position you're supposed to take and there's like a whole bunch of enemies just trying to guard it, and then you're that one dude that runs in and just knocks them all on their butts. It was great times. I got strongly worded messages from people because I was doing that kind of a thing. They were not happy with me.
You did remind me of something else, though, that's pretty cool about Chewbacca, and that's his choice of weapon. I don't know where he came into, like how he got his bow, his crossbow, but the fact that he doesn't really use a blaster and he's always using a crossbow, I think is pretty cool. And that's kind of a trait of his species, right? Because don't the rest of his species use that?
Yeah, the Wookiees on Kashyyyk, they use bowcasters. We see that more, well, very briefly, but we do see it more in Revenge of the Sith for the couple of shots that we get of the Battle of Kashyyyk. We can see them with the different weapons.
Alyssa, do you think that you're mainly in love with the species, meaning like all of them, or just Chewbacca and the rest you could leave or take, don't really care?
Just Chewbacca. I could care less for the rest.
I was gonna say an alternative question is, do you know any of the other Wookiees
I
besides
don't.
Chewbacca?
The only one I know is Chewbacca, so I
Have you
could care
seen
less.
Have you seen the holiday special?
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll have to make sure that we get you to watch that sometime. I'm not gonna say it's a great movie, but it's Chewbacca's family, so that's pretty cool.
I feel like it'll grow. It grows on you. It is so terrible that eventually it becomes a classic. So you just gotta give it a little bit of time. Just soak it all in. Especially every time that you say, is this really happening? Especially the scene with Itchy, which is Chewbacca's dad.
I think so.
Right? Itchy and the Christmas or holiday gift that he gets. Very interesting scene to say the least.
For those who don't know, it's about Chewbacca's family celebrating Life Day, and Chewbacca and Han Solo are trying to get back to Kashyyyk to be able to celebrate with them. But there's been some troubles and some delays and, other miscellaneous things that happen that kind of prevent their journey from continuing until the very end of the movie.
And if you visit Disney parks around the holiday season, there is actually a decent amount of Life Day merch. So there's more Wookiee type um, clothing, and they have like a special robe that they wear for their ceremony, and you can buy that robe at Disney. We did not this year. We thought about it, but ultimately, I don't think we would wear it enough to justify. I think it was like $50.
It was around there, and it was basically a very large snuggie. Because although it was a robe, yes, it was really more a wearable blanket than like a bathrobe. It wasn't a bathrobe; it was a blanket with sleeves.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. Like if you bought one, I am partially jealous because I am a big fan of the holiday special, and having that kind of a connection to the show or movie, whatever you want to classify it as, um, is very neat. Um,
And let's not forget about let the Wookiee win.
yeah.
Chewbacca is not one who wants to lose at his games.
And what will they do if you do not let them win?
Did he say specifically?
Yeah,
I,
he said it'll rip your arms out of their sockets.
I knew it was something drastic. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, because C-3PO asked what would happen, or C-3PO said something about, nobody's worried about upsetting a droid, and then Han Solo says, well, it's because when you upset a droid, they don't rip uh the people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Wookiees are known to do that. So, yeah, Chewbacca's got a little bit of a anger management situation there, where if he loses at a pitiful hollow chess game, um, he might drastically change your life for the rest of your life.
Going
Not that
back to Dis Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Sarah. Going back to Disney World just a little bit. Um, there is a character experience where you can meet Chewbacca, and I did that back in, I think, 2016. Highly recommend it. He looked around the corner at me and my friends when we went to meet him, and he did his little sound, and it was a great experience. I had the biggest smile on my face when I took my picture with Chewbacca, and it was super fun. So I would wait the same amount of time that I wait. I probably waited an hour to meet Chewbacca in Hollywood Studios.
Wasn't that with us?
No, that was my senior year of high school.
Oh, I feel like I remember us going to meet him too, but I could be wrong. We
Because
met
it
a
was
handful of people.
because it was when I went with Victoria.
Gotcha.
Was his costume soft?
It was.
Did you hug him?
I think so, yeah. Because it was before COVID, so you could like actually touch each other. That in a weird way, but you know what I mean.
Chewbacca, your fur is so soft.
No, but it was really cool. I think Disney's really good about like having their actors that are playing characters like in a meet and greet actually live up to what they are in the movies. So,
Probably had to
he
be.
he wasn't speaking English, so he was speaking Chewbacca language. So that was really cool.
He probably had to be a really tall dude.
Yeah, he was relatively tall.
What is their language? Would you call that Kashyyykian?
Let's look it up. I'll get on that really quick.
So what I was going to say a minute ago was not that I'm as aggressive as Chewbacca, but I identify with him when he doesn't like to lose. I am very competitive with my games, and I always want to win, and it's very heartbreaking when I don't. So
I have to agree.
I got you, Chewbacca. We're one of the same there.
I did find it. It says there are actually 3 languages for Wookiees. The main one is called Shriwook. It says Chewbacca speaks Shriwook specifically, but it says other Wookiees may speak either Taikaran or Taikaran or Zajic. I don't know how to pronounce that. That is something. But Shriwook is the main language, it seems like. The most. It makes me wonder if it's like very different, or is it different in the sense of like English as opposed to slang terms, or like things that change up the language but it's not really changing the language, or is it drastically different where if you know one you don't know the other?
Maybe it's like Spanish and Italian, where they're different languages, but some of their words are somewhat similar enough that you can kind of grasp what people are saying sometimes.
Maybe. I
Just
don't know.
thought.
Next time we go to Disney World, we better ask him. And he better have an answer. If
He'll
he looks at,
probably answer you in his language and you still won't know.
it'd be hilarious if he answers you in English because he's so thrown off. How dare you mess up my experience? That'd be funny. I wonder if anybody has done that where they've thrown an actor so much where they break character. Because even when, I mean, it's totally off topic, but even when Gaston had that issue not too long ago with the woman, he never broke character. He still acted like Gaston. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. Basically, a woman tried to do something she wasn't supposed to, and she was escorted out very quickly. But we're gonna break here for a quick minute. We'll get a quick word from the advertisement of the channel, and then we'll be right back with one more favorite character, so stick around. Have you seen The Mandalorian? Do you wonder what Operation Cinder was that they mentioned in this show? Well, we got you covered because we have an entire playlist dedicated to the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign, which highlights Operation Cinder. So if you check out our playlist, you'll be able to see what actually happened with Operation Cinder and know what they're talking about with the show. Now back to ours. All right, we are back with our third part of this segment. My favorite Star Wars character is kind of a 2-in-1. Sarah said I was cheating when I was telling her who I was going to pick. And my favorite character is Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader. I think ultimately the reason why I feel more attached to this character than any other, for one, Darth Vader is the best villain that ever lived. I don't care what movie you're talking about, he's the best. But everybody says that each generation has their Star Wars, and my generation grew up with Anakin Skywalker, and so we got to, see his journey as he became Darth Vader. And then right when, my generation became an adult, which was a handful of years after episode 3 came out, then we start to be able to rationalize, what actually happened with him. And then we can see, why things happened the way they did. Vader is perceived as this really, really bad guy, but when you look at his character deep down, hey, I see you laughing over there. What you laughing about?
I'm gonna let you continue. We'll get to it.
Darth Vader is seen as a very, very bad guy, but if you really deep dive into his character, I think there can be a lot of sympathy that goes towards him as a person. If you think about it, all Anakin wanted to do was to save his wife in the very beginning. This is how it all started. He also grew up as a slave, and when he got to do his dream of becoming a Jedi, as soon as he got there, everybody except for the one person, the first Jedi he ever met, didn't like him. They didn't care what he had to say. They basically said, without saying it directly, Qui-Gon wanted you to be a part of this. Maybe he was smart, maybe he wasn't, but we're just going to let you be here, and we're not going to care about you. And that's essentially what happened. So he was kind of the reject of the group, even though he was the most important being in the Jedi Order. And I think because he lived his first handful of years, I don't know how old he was when he got picked up by Qui-Gon, but he spent the first chunk of his life as a slave, and then he spent his I don't know if we want to call them golden years, but his teenage years and his low 20s with a bunch of people that said, we don't like you. And then a lot of them, you could tell they didn't like him. They just didn't want to say it to his face. And, you know, there's this one figure in the background, which is the Emperor, who is treating him like family. He is the fatherly figure that he never had, because Anakin never had a dad. And when the Jedi are telling him, no, 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 he's telling him, the Emperor is telling him yes. And he's giving him this perception of, you know, if you follow me, I'll give you everything you want and more, including the ability to save your wife, because he knows about what's happening between Anakin and Padme. And so Anakin basically,
the death of his mom was pretty traumatizing too.
Yeah, and which also made him go further towards the Emperor when he mentions being able to save someone from death, because he really feels the guilt that he wasn't able to save his mother. And so, you know, we start to build this character of all of this stuff that he has to deal with. Mind you, because the Jedi don't care about him, he's having to deal with this stuff mostly on his own until, of course, you know, he gets married to Padme, and then he can talk to her about this type of stuff a little bit. And obviously he's talked to the Emperor as well, because, well, he doesn't know he's the Emperor at this point, but we know in episode 3, Palpatine says on his own, you know, a reference to the Sand People and his mother. So we know that Anakin is sharing these little bits and pieces that really bother him with this guy. And he's being the only, between him and Padme, those are the only two people in his life that he cares the most about. Of course, he cares about Obi-Wan, but we also know that it's like a very hard love-hate relationship, because he loves him as a brother, but we can also see that when he's talking to Padme, that he feels that Obi-Wan is the big barrier between him and what he visualizes as greatness. So his character is, or him as a person, he's crying out for help and nobody wants to help him. They just want to shut him up. And so when he actually turns into this being of, you know, now I'm working with the Emperor, I can have all I want, and Padme tells him no, you know, he ends up destroying the one thing that he really loves. And so a lot of us don't know about this because we don't read the comics and stuff. But once Vader actually, you know, was buddy-buddy with the Emperor wasn't buddy-buddy with him once he had him in his control. One of the big things with Anakin is that he had, well, Anakin / Vader, is that he had a very, he still had the light side in him that he hadn't totally crushed. And anytime that the Emperor felt that he was swaying a little bit back and forth, he would torture him. He would electrify him with force lightning and basically tell him, you are with me, you are not part of that anymore, and so deal with it, basically, or I'll kill you. And so, you know, this character that we've been driven to care about so much, and then we finally see him fall and he gets what he wants. Well, he doesn't get what he wants, because now he has to live kind of in fear of his master. And what we see, whether you pay attention to canon or not, or just listen to the idea of how the Sith work with the rule of two, Vader is constantly trying to plot against the Emperor because he wants to kill him. You know, there's this one fatherly figure in his life, and he wants to get rid of him because, you know, tables, what does Michael Scott say? tables turn, whatever.
How how the turntables tabled or something like
Yeah.
that.
So we'll go with that as far as, the emperor seemed like a fatherly figure, and now he's probably the worst thing for him. So I feel like once you deep dive into Vader's character a little bit, aside from, seeing, if you think of Vader as just this person of, what happened at the end of Rogue One, where he slaughters a bunch of people, or all the different books and comics that are out there where it focuses on Vader as I'm trying to get what I want, I'm going to kill anybody in my way sort of a thing. If we focus on that, I think he's painted to be a very, very bad guy. But I think if you understand his entire story arc, you kind of see that in a way, that's not him. It's what the Emperor wants him to be and is controlling him to be. So I think his character is a very interesting one to deep dive. And I think because there's so much that can be unpacked from him. And once again, like I said, I grew up with the character as my Star Wars, quote unquote. I feel like he's the one that I gravitate to the most. And so, yeah, I really like the Anakin Darth Vader character. Mind you, another really cool connection to Darth Vader, which doesn't have to do with his story in Star Wars. The voice of Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, he actually grew up in Michigan. He was not born in Michigan, but he grew up in Michigan. And that's where we're all from. So, very cool connection to see that our homeboy grew up in the same state. We actually, in Alyssa and mine's past, and a little bit when I was dating Sarah, we still visit that city. It's a very, very, well, it's not a city, it's a little town, I should say. Very, very small town, and still pretty lively. So if you ever want to check out one of the cool places of where our favorite voice of Darth Vader is from, check out Brethren, Michigan. That's where he grew up. I did like a whole soap opera here about Darth Vader, and not just different oh, he's cool this, oh, he's cool because of his toys. So
Hey,
no, I'm just saying, like, I almost feel like I went a little off the rails with that explanation, but
to
yeah.
be
I felt like I was at work a little bit hearing about Anakin's trauma history.
That's what he is. Quite honestly, he's somebody that if you really don't think about it, you don't realize it. And I think one of the big bad vibes that Anakin's character gets from the prequels is that he's very whiny. And a lot of people even say that Hayden Christensen did a terrible job with acting because he's so whiny. But one thing we have to remember, kind of what I was talking about, he actually did exactly what George Lucas asked for. If you go in behind the scenes stuff or read the books about when the movies were made, Hayden was asked to do all of that stuff. And the reason why, how would you feel if you were a slave for your, first 6 or 7 years of your life? How would you feel if you finally get your dream job, but once you get there, everybody hates you just because you're said to be this awesome, brilliant person, and they're, I don't know if intimidated is the word, but that it's a put off from your peers. They don't want, they'll smile to your face, but they'll talk about you behind your back, That would be the worst feeling in the world. I think that would drive anybody nuts. So there's definitely some interesting deep dives you can do about his character.
So there's a few different things here I want to say. One is to defend ourselves, okay? Our favorite characters are not ones that are necessarily story drivers in all of the films, such as yours. Chewie plays a lot bigger role than the Ewoks do, so I will give him that. But your character is one who, especially since you cheated and picked not one but two, okay?
I did not. It is one person.
I'm just gonna ignore that because it's still 2.
The small amount of meat that is still in that robotic suit, that is still Anakin's body. Thank you very much.
You always say they're 2 different characters, and it's not one character, so.
What are you talking about, Willis?
Because one is evil and one is good. Because you can't be an evil Jedi, because then you're a Sith.
All of us have good and evil in our hearts, no matter how much we want to deny it. So, nah.
I'm talking about the Star Wars world, not our world. But anyway, I'm not going to go down that side path. What I was trying to say is that your character is one. Your characters are ones who are in a majority of the films and play big story driving roles, whereas Wicket he's a medium-sized role in, say, one of the films and a very minor role in maybe another film, maybe. I mean, he's got his own TV shows and stuff, but, Chewie, he plays a pretty big role in a couple of the films, and he's a big part of Solo and stuff too. But it's not as big of a character as yours. So when I talk about things that are cool with my character and I talk about things like toys and stuff, that's why, because that's all I got to hold on to, and I still love it anyway. Now, the second thing.
One second. I apologize if my comment made you guys feel like you were attacked. What I was trying to get across with my comment was that I feel like the connection I have to the character is different than how you guys have some connections to your characters. That's what I was trying to get across, but maybe it wasn't the best way. I apologize.
No, it's all fun. It's fine. I'm just poking back at you. The other part I was going to say and why I was laughing earlier, now that, I've let you explain yourself a bit and stuff. Okay.
What was this laughing business?
You said, correct me if I'm wrong, Darth Vader is perceived as being worse than he is, and that Darth Vader is not that bad of a guy, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What part of, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna call back to the Kenobi show, right? When he's going through the streets trying to find Kenobi, and he's force choking and killing anybody who's even just standing in the street, not even in his way, because they're like off to the sides of the streets and stuff, He's just force choking and killing a whole bunch of random people, trying to draw Kenobi out as if there's no other way other than killing multiple people. I'm gonna focus on this one example because there's lots of examples of him just killing random people.
Which I did point out, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Some people have bad days. Everybody has those days. Everybody makes
Do
mistakes.
not bring Hannah Montana into this. Do not bring her into this.
Can you explain what just happened?
That's a Hannah Montana
lyrics to a Hannah Montana song, and we are not bringing her into this.
I knew that would jar Alyssa a little bit, and so I thought about doing it. Yes, like I said, there are very, very bad things that he does. But I would not say that he is a 100% evil being. There is something in there where, and Luke saw it too, because that's how he got his father to come back at the end of episode 6, spoiler alert. There's something in there where he is still human. He is still light. And you want to bring up Kenobi. Listen here, girl. In the last episode of Kenobi, we had that beautiful scene, mind you, beautiful scene of Anakin / Vader talking to Kenobi, and we had this amazing visual of when his mask is cut open. I'm sorry, Alyssa, you haven't seen this show, but this was amazing. The helmet was cut open, and we got to see the flesh. We got to see Anakin, and when the blue was on his face, it was Anakin basically crying for help. It was him on the inside wanting to be brothers again with the guy in front of him. But when the color red would come over his face, that was the evilness in his heart trying to basically crush the goodness in him. So I was just like that scene. Good day, bad day. Good day, bad day. So there's he's not just a monster, is what I'm trying to say. Yes, he did a lot of bad things. And like we talked about in the last podcast, very briefly, because we're kind of going over on this Vader section. We talked about when episode 6 was being made, and we were talking about how George had the idea where Vader at the last second is going to switch back to being a Jedi. And there's this idea that, well, no, it's not an idea. Someone came up to George and said, how could someone do this? How could, in the last seconds of Vader's life, turn back to being good? And I'm actually repeating this because I don't think Alyssa knows about this story. It's actually a really good one. One of the people on the that was working on Return of the Jedi came up to George and asked him, how could that happen? And George basically said, well, what about you? I'm sure there's a lot of bad things you've done in your life, but isn't it in your religion where when you die, you're going to have judgment? And then because the guy was, I think, Christian, the belief is that, Jesus gave his life so that when you die, your sins will be forgiven. And George was kind of playing that here and with the religion of the Jedi, because no matter what Vader did, if it was part of his religion, which maybe it's part of the Jedi religion, I can't confirm because I haven't read the Jedi quote-unquote Bible, but there is a chance where, there's some sort of judgment, maybe by the Wills, which is something in Star Wars that a lot of people don't know about. Star Wars is supposed to be told from the perspective of the Wills, which is the creators of basically the universe and the galaxy. So if that's where that goes, maybe he's forgiven for what he's done if he really does see that what he did was bad when he talks to Luke at the end of it all. But it's interesting how the one guy said to George, how in the world could this happen? But then George flipped it and said, that's religion today. No matter what you've done, you will be forgiven when you go to meet your creator. So same thing could be applied here. And that's actually, what settled that argument. The guy was basically like, you know what? I'm gonna shut up because you're right, kind of a thing. So it's an interesting perspective to think about. I don't remember what book it was. It's like a Star Wars Archives book, and it's red and whatnot. I do not have the book because it's super expensive. It's like $200. But it's in there. And maybe one day we'll have that book and we'll be able to enjoy all that other stuff. But we're going to wrap up this Darth Vader segment, and then we'll be right back with some honorable mentions, who probably was very close to making the list but didn't, and then we will wrap it up here. So we'll be right back after this. Have you ever wondered what Amazon coffins are and what they're full of? Well, we got you covered here on the channel. Check out our playlist of our Amazon coffin unboxings, where Sarah and I open up boxes that have Amazon returns, and we share with all of you what we get in each of those boxes. If you ever wanted to get into liquidation and want to know what types of things you can find, check us out. Now back to our show. All right, we are back with the final segment of today's Shoot the Sheev podcast. We all talked about our favorite Star Wars characters. Some may say, and I'm looking at you, Sarah, that 4 characters were mentioned. But we have some honorable mentions that we wanted to talk about at the end of this Shoot the Sheev episode before we leave all of you. So does anybody have any honorable mentions that they want to say?
Before we get into those, I just want to say, because I kind of ran out of time earlier before our break, is that Jeremy, I feel like you did a really good job explaining Anakin and his actual backstory and stuff. So that's a lot of information that I knew but didn't necessarily piece together before to really kind of explain him. So kudos to you.
I can appreciate that because just like you guys before, I was starting to feel attacked.
Okay, so in terms of honorable mentions, I'm going to go with C3PO and R2D2. They are two droids that are very different from each other, but they are together a lot. And they almost like brothers, I guess, or siblings, even though they're droids, right? But they're always together. 3PO is just I like him because he's so literal. It's to the point where it's kind of comical. Um, and R2, he can be pretty sassy too. They both have their different skills of things that they can do and whatnot, and I just feel like their chemistry together is a really good duo. And I enjoyed seeing them in their films. And I gotta admit, I don't remember which movie it is, so I'm sorry. But
I'll help you.
when CPO when C3PO said he was taking one last look at his friends.
Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, yes. I agree with the majority of people that say that that's kind of a not so good line for him to say, because when he said that, he wasn't looking at, you would expect him to be looking at Han and Chewbacca and Leia and Luke, and none of those people were there, so it's not really like his main best friends. But that scene did make me tear up, and I felt for 3PO, even though he was a droid. So the fact that I felt bad for a droid tells you I really like that guy. So I just him and R2, I feel like they have a good relationship, and I always enjoy seeing them in their different films.
Which is interesting too, because we talked about earlier that with Alyssa's Chewbacca character, they kind of dangled this, oh, he's gonna die, and then 30 seconds later he was back. It wasn't as quick of a turnaround, but the same thing kind of happened to 3PO. I think when that trailer came out and we saw that like emotional line come out, and then John Williams, like smashed us with that really, really nice emotional music, like we all felt like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to 3PO? But by the end of the movie, he's back to being 3PO. So kind of an interesting thing that they did that with two characters. I think the 3PO and R2 chemistry in a way is life goals. I really, really like the sassy dynamic that they have between each other, but yet there's so much love. They say that droids don't have feelings, but I could definitely argue that there is. Those two, there's a reason why they've worked together for so long. Yeah, those are two droids that just make me feel good.
Alyssa, what would be your honorable mention?
My honorable mention is another droid. Mine would be BB-8. I think he's just cute. But he also just has a really big personality. Similar to that of C3PO and R2D2. And I just think the loyalty he has in the movies throughout the films is great, and the beam of fire that he puts up for his thumbs up is super cute and comical throughout the movies too. So I just think, like Chewbacca, he's a good asset to the films.
He was also like he was one of the big criticisms that the sequel trilogy has is that they didn't add much to Star Wars. But BB-8 was like he was the first droid that was basically a sphere that rolled around on the ground. So it was really cool to see that type of droid come out of the sequel trilogy, and it has so much of an impact on Sarah and I that when we went to Disney World, and this was a trip with Alyssa, we said to ourselves, when we go to make a droid, we are going to make an OG droid. We are going to make an R2 unit. And dang it, when we left, we had a BB unit. He's somewhere around here. I think he's down by my feet. But yeah, that type of droid, a BB unit, definitely made an impact on people, I think. So I think he's definitely worthy of an honorable mention. Plus his personality. He's really, really cool. I would say if I had one honorable mention, I would say Qui-Gon Jinn. He is not a droid, but we didn't get much time with him in the films. He's someone that I wish we got more live action screen time. We did see him a little bit in the animated shows, very briefly, more or less like an echo of his voice. We did see him, spoiler alert, at the end of the Kenobi show, so maybe we'll get a little bit more of his character. But I really liked him because he was one of the first people that was willing to stick his finger in the Jedi's face, saying that, you know, you are heading down the wrong path. You're kind of losing your footing with what you are meant to be. It's actually, people wonder, why doesn't he have a seat on the Jedi Council? He was offered a seat and he rejected it because he did not agree with what they do. So between him and his mentor, Count Dooku, which also was a very big skeptic of what the council was doing, they are characters where they saw what was happening, and if, again, kind of a little bit like Anakin, if they were listened to, some of these big things probably wouldn't have happened, as far as like the fall of the Jedi, and like the Emperor would have never had that point of view of the Jedi are taking control. Well, yeah, they kind of weaseled their way into taking control because they were losing their way. And so I kind of think that Qui-Gon was pretty big because he was, like I said, one of the first people that actually stood up for what he believed in and was willing to, you know, push back. And, you know, it was probably unheard of for Jedi to turn down a seat on the council, but yeah, he did it. So he was also one of my growing up, like my generation of Star Wars. He was really cool. And I just enjoyed his character.
Also Liam Neeson, so
Yeah.
he's got that going for him.
Liam Neeson is awesome. If you don't know, you should know. Check out his movies. Probably, aside from Star Wars, he's probably known for Taken, but there's a good handful of others that he's really good in as well. But we are going to go ahead and wrap it up here. We talked about our favorites, talked about a couple of honorable mentions. I don't know about you guys, but I had a lot of fun with doing this and talking about our favorite characters. Kind of a foreshadow. This one, we talked about our favorites. There will be a video in the future of our least favorites. So look forward to that. If you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Turn on your notifications. That way you are alerted when our next Shoot the Sheev podcast comes out. Drop us a like if you liked it, and drop us a comment letting us know your favorite characters from Star Wars. Alyssa, thank you for being with us here on this video today. Hopefully we'll see you more in the future on our podcasts. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.